Imagine sitting across from your partner, the words you need to say stuck in your throat, that familiar knot tightening in your stomach as you choose once more peace over authenticity. Your shoulders tense, your breathing shallow. In that moment, you're not alone. An overwhelming 68% of women, more than two-thirds, regularly compromise on needs they later identify as absolute deal breakers. The relationship advice most women receive doesn't just fall short, it actively undermines your happiness. After witnessing hundreds of relationships follow this exact pattern, I can tell you with certainty, those reasonable compromises lead predictably to resentment, disconnection, and relationship collapse. What if the very compromises making you easy to love are actually making you impossible to truly love? What you'll discover in the next few minutes will change everything. Today, I'm revealing the standard spectrum, 7 non-negotiable needs that have transformed relationships for countless women caught in the same compromise trap you may be experiencing right now. Let me share something surprising. One woman I worked with transformed her 3-year relationship in just weeks after implementing these standards. Her partner initially resisted, but then told her, "I respect you more now than ever before." This isn't unusual. What most relationship experts miss is that maintaining standards actually creates less conflict, not more. After observing hundreds of relationship trajectories, I've identified a consistent turning point where women either maintain essential standards and thrive or compromise core needs and suffer. This isn't theoretical relationship advice. It's the documented pattern of what actually works. There's a pivotal moment I've witnessed repeatedly, when a woman clearly articulates a non-negotiable need and the relationship either evolves or reveals its limitations. The key lies in understanding the fundamental difference between healthy flexibility and harmful self-abandonment. This distinction transforms relationship outcomes more than any other factor I've observed. From childhood, we absorb messages that shape our relationship behaviors. Be understanding of his needs. Don't rock the boat. You're expecting too much. Relationships require sacrifice. These cultural scripts run so deep that challenging them feels almost rebellious. You know that familiar tightness in your chest, shallow breathing, and slight dissociation that happens when you're overriding your intuition about what feels wrong? That physical response is wisdom your body offers before your mind can articulate it. Then comes that inner voice questioning if you're too needy, too sensitive, or expecting perfection when you're simply requiring basic relational health. This isn't your voice. It's the internalized chorus of messages that prioritize relationship preservation over your well-being. Consider how this plays out. You repeatedly explain away your partner's dismissive responses to emotional needs, telling yourself, "He's just stressed." You minimize disrespectful behavior in public while feeling the shame privately. You constantly adjust your communication to avoid triggering defensiveness, walking on emotional eggshells in your own relationship. The cumulative impact? A slow erosion of self-trust with each ignored need, creating a foundation of doubt in your own experience. This doubt becomes the lens through which you view all relationship dynamics. Healthy compromise involves flexibility on preferences. Harmful compromise sacrifices fundamental needs that affect your well-being. This distinction changes everything. Your willingness to compromise comes from emotional intelligence and relationship commitment, admirable qualities that deserve to be directed toward healthy flexibility, not self-erasure. The problem isn't your commitment to making relationships work. It's that you've been applying this strength in ways that ultimately undermine connection. Before we explore these 7 non-negotiable needs, let's clarify the distinction that changes everything. Preferences are negotiable aspects you can adjust without harm, like movie choices or vacation destinations. Expectations are hopes for how relationship dynamics might unfold. But standards? These are the non-negotiable requirements for your emotional and psychological well-being. The standard spectrum is your tool for evaluating which relationship needs fall into which category. This framework helps you identify what you can comfortably flex on versus what creates harm when compromised. I'll present these 7 needs in order from foundation to refinement, starting with the most fundamental requirements upon which all else depends: and building toward those that create true relationship excellence. The most fundamental non-negotiable in any relationship is consistent treatment that honors your inherent worth and emotional experience. This isn't just about avoiding obvious disrespect. It's about the subtle daily interactions that either affirm or erode your sense of value. Psychologically, respect and emotional safety form the foundation for all other relationship functions. Without this baseline, nothing else can flourish. Not intimacy, not trust, not shared joy. This is why we begin here. The warning signs that you're compromising this standard often feel subtle. Finding yourself mentally preparing before raising concerns, apologizing for normal emotional responses, that familiar sensation of walking on eggshells in your own relationship. Look at this common scenario. You express a feeling, and your partner responds with subtle dismissiveness. Perhaps an eye roll, a sigh, or words that minimize your experience. Instead of addressing this, you accept it, telling yourself, he doesn't mean it that way, or I'm being too sensitive. One woman I worked with tolerated small disrespects for years until a public incident where her partner mocked her opinion during dinner with friends. The shame she felt in that moment crystallized everything. She realized respect wasn't optional but essential, not just for her relationship but for her sense of self. Contrary to popular belief, men who are capable of depth actually respect women who require respectful treatment. The common misconception is that requiring respect means never experiencing conflict, when in reality, respectful disagreement strengthens relationships while disrespectful peace destroys them. When you maintain this standard, you establish an unwavering expectation of dignified treatment. This isn't just for your benefit. It creates a culture of mutual respect that elevates relationship quality for both partners. A respectful relationship environment allows vulnerability, authenticity, and deeper connection that benefits everyone involved. The second non-negotiable need builds directly upon respect, trust, and transparent communication. This means reliable honesty and appropriate openness that creates genuine security between partners. Note that word appropriate. We'll explore that nuance shortly. Psychologically, trust functions as the prerequisite for vulnerability and true intimacy. Without a foundation of trust, your nervous system remains in a subtle state of vigilance, making deep connection impossible. You simply cannot be authentically vulnerable with someone your body doesn't trust. How do you know if you're compromising this standard? Pay attention to these warning signs. Finding yourself checking your partner's story or verifying information, feeling hesitation before asking certain questions, experiencing a persistent background hum of doubt that you try to ignore. Consider this common scenario. Your partner tells you something that doesn't quite add up, perhaps about where they were or who they were with. You notice the inconsistency but accept the little lie, telling yourself everyone has secrets or it's not that important. Each time this happens, something subtle erodes within the relationship foundation. A common misconception here is that requiring transparency means eliminating all privacy. This creates a false dichotomy, either total disclosure or accepted deception. The reality is more nuanced. Healthy relationships maintain appropriate privacy, internal thoughts, personal space, certain friendships, while practicing honesty about matters that affect the relationship. When you maintain this standard of trust and transparency, you create the foundation for authentic connection without the energy-draining tax of doubt. The benefit extends to both partners. You both experience the security of knowing where you stand and the freedom from living in the prison of suspicion. This creates relationship efficiency. Emotional energy that would be spent on doubt can instead be invested in deepening your connection. The third non-negotiable builds naturally upon respect and trust, reciprocal emotional investment. This means balanced effort in maintaining and deepening your emotional connection. Not identical effort, balanced effort. Psychologically, one-sided emotional labor inevitably creates depletion and eventual resentment, no matter how willing you initially are to carry this weight. The human emotional system isn't designed to sustain one-way investment indefinitely. What begins as generosity gradually transforms into exhaustion. You're compromising this standard if you recognize these warning signs, feeling solely responsible for the emotional temperature of your relationship. Noticing that meaningful conversation completely stops when you stop initiating it, sensing that you're the only one tracking the relationship's health and needs. Here's how this typically unfolds. You consistently initiate emotional conversations. You're the only one asking meaningful questions about feelings or experiences, and you find yourself silently managing the relationship's entire emotional landscape. When conflicts arise, you're the designated processor while your partner remains passive or disengaged. It's important to recognize that emotional investment manifests differently across genders and individuals. While women often invest through conversation and verbal processing, men may show investment through actions, problem solving, or physical presence. Both expressions are valid, but both must be present. The form can differ, but the investment must be mutual. The common rationalization I hear is, "He's just not as emotionally expressive as I am." This statement contains a partial truth that masks the real issue. Different emotional styles are natural, but complete emotional delegation is not. There's a crucial difference between having a different emotional style and outsourcing emotional responsibility entirely. When you maintain this standard of reciprocal investment, you create a sustainable relationship dynamic where both partners feel valued and seen. The mutual benefit is profound. Both experience deeper connection and emotional growth through shared responsibility. Partners who share emotional labor actually develop greater emotional intelligence together, as neither becomes emotionally underdeveloped or overburdened. As we move from relationship foundations to architecture, we arrive at our fourth non-negotiable: values alignment on critical life dimensions. This means compatibility in core beliefs and priorities that affect your daily life and long-term direction. Psychologically, shared values create natural harmony in decision-making. When your fundamental values align, many decisions that would otherwise require exhausting negotiation happen with relative ease. This alignment functions as an invisible force that either simplifies your life together or complicates every intersection. You're compromising this standard if you notice these warning signs: frequent fundamental disagreements about what matters most, a persistent feeling that you can't be fully authentic about your deeper beliefs, or sensing that major life decisions always require one person to sacrifice their core values. Consider this common scenario. You recognize significant differences in how you and your partner view critical aspects of life, perhaps life goals, parenting approaches, financial philosophies, or ethical frameworks. But you dismiss these disparities, telling yourself, "Love conquers all," or "We can figure it out later." These rationalizations postpone inevitable friction that becomes more consequential as the relationship deepens. An important clarification: values alignment doesn't mean identical beliefs across all domains. It means compatibility in the areas that most impact your daily life and long-term fulfillment. You don't need to agree on everything, but alignment in how you view family, money, life purpose, and ethical boundaries creates a foundation for harmony in areas that generate the most significant relationship conflict. When you maintain this standard of values alignment, you prevent fundamental conflict and years of unnecessary struggle over issues that rarely resolve through compromise because they reflect core identity. The mutual benefit is substantial. Both partners experience natural flow in life planning and significantly reduced conflict around major decision points. This creates a sense of being on the same team rather than constant opposition over what matters most. Now we arrive at a counterintuitive standard that may surprise you: the right to reasonable discomfort. This means preserving the freedom to express needs, concerns, and boundaries, even when inconvenient or temporarily uncomfortable for either partner. Psychologically, relationship health fundamentally requires space for authentic communication, even when, and especially when, that communication creates discomfort. The capacity to tolerate necessary discomfort actually determines a relationship's ability to evolve and deepen over time. The warning signs that you're compromising this standard are subtle but significant. Finding yourself regularly self-censoring to maintain surface peace. Noticing a growing inventory of unaddressed issues you've decided are not worth mentioning. Feeling a persistent gap between your outer presentation and inner experience in the relationship. This typically manifests in scenarios like avoiding important conversations because you anticipate your partner's negative reaction, consistently prioritizing temporary harmony over necessary honesty, or carefully managing your authentic responses to prevent any disruption to your partner's comfort. The common misconception here is that healthy relationships are always comfortable and easy, that the absence of conflict indicates relationship success. This belief creates a dangerous pattern where authentic communication is sacrificed in service of artificial peace. I frequently hear rationalizations like, "It's not worth upsetting him," or "I can live with it." These statements may be true for genuine preferences, but when applied to actual needs or persistent issues, they facilitate a relationship built on performance rather than authenticity. When you maintain this standard, the right to reasonable discomfort, you create a relationship that can actually evolve through authentic communication rather than stagnating in comfortable patterns that quietly erode connection. Both partners benefit by experiencing the security of knowing issues can be addressed rather than buried, creating a foundation of trust that can weather necessary growing pains and inevitable challenges. Remember, a relationship that cannot tolerate reasonable discomfort cannot facilitate genuine growth or authentic connection. The capacity to navigate necessary discomfort together is what separates relationships that evolve from those that eventually implode or dissolve. As we continue building our relationship framework, we arrive at our sixth non-negotiable: growth compatibility and personal expansion. This standard involves the active support of individual development and aspirations within the context of your partnership. From a psychological perspective, growth compatibility fundamentally determines both relationship longevity and fulfillment. When two people either grow together or support each other's separate growth journeys, the relationship remains vital. When one person's growth is consistently sacrificed or stunted, resentment inevitably forms, sometimes taking years to surface, but always eventually emerging. You're compromising this standard if you recognize these warning signs, finding yourself minimizing your ambitions in conversations with your partner, hiding achievements to avoid triggering insecurity, experiencing a persistent sense of being held back from your potential, or noticing a pattern of abandoning interests that don't include your partner. This typically manifests in scenarios like deliberately downplaying your successes to avoid intimidating your partner, gradually abandoning personal goals that your partner doesn't enthusiastically support, or making career decisions based primarily on your partner's comfort rather than your authentic aspirations. An important distinction: growth compatibility differs from independence. This isn't about pursuing separate lives, it's about thriving individually while remaining deeply connected. The healthiest relationships function as secure bases from which both partners can explore and grow, knowing they have emotional support to return to. The common rationalizations I hear include, relationships require sacrifice, or my dreams aren't that important compared to our relationship. These statements contain partial truths that mask deeper issues. While relationships do involve compromise, systematically sacrificing your growth path leads to a hollowed-out version of yourself that ultimately damages the relationship. When you maintain this standard of growth compatibility, you create a relationship that enhances rather than limits your potential. The mutual benefit is profound. Both partners experience continuous growth and mutual inspiration. Rather than competing or restricting each other, you function as catalysts for each other's evolution, creating a dynamic partnership that remains interesting and alive across decades. The most fulfilling long-term relationships I've observed share this quality. Partners who take genuine joy and pride in each other's growth, who push each other toward greatness rather than comfort, and who understand that supporting each other's evolution strengthens rather than threatens their bond. We arrive at our final non-negotiable: appropriate effort and investment balance. This means an equitable contribution to relationship growth and maintenance. Not always equal in form, but equitable in impact and intention. Psychologically, imbalanced effort inevitably creates caretaker-dependent dynamics that stifle authentic connection. When one partner consistently carries the relationship, both roles become distorted. One overburdened with responsibility, the other underdeveloped in relationship skills. This imbalance prevents the mutual vulnerability that creates true intimacy. You're compromising this standard if you experience these warning signs: a persistent sense of carrying the relationship, chronic exhaustion from relationship management, finding yourself mentally keeping score of efforts, or feeling more like a parent or coordinator than a partner. This typically manifests in scenarios like consistently managing all logistics, plans, and scheduling, carrying the bulk of emotional labor, being solely responsible for relationship milestones and celebrations, or finding that relationship maintenance completely stops when you stop making effort. A common misconception is that effort means identical contributions in identical areas. This creates a false standard that ignores individual strengths and preferences. The key isn't identical contribution. It's mutual investment that feels balanced over time. I frequently hear rationalizations like, "I'm just better at these things," or "he shows love differently." While acknowledging different strengths and love languages is valid, these statements become problematic when used to justify complete delegation of relationship responsibilities to one partner. One woman I worked with carried all relationship logistics for years, from planning dates to remembering birthdays to initiating important conversations. When she finally established a new standard, her partner initially struggled but then developed previously untapped relationship skills. 3 months later, he told her, "I never realized how much I was missing by letting you do everything. I feel more connected to you now that I'm actually participating." When you maintain this standard of appropriate effort balance, you ensure a sustainable partnership rather than one-sided devotion that inevitably leads to burnout. The mutual benefit transforms the entire relationship dynamic. Both partners experience a connection that feels mutually rewarding rather than depleting. This balance creates relationship resilience, the capacity to weather challenges without one partner becoming overwhelmed by carrying the response alone. The most sustainable relationships I've observed demonstrate this quality. Partners who both actively tend the relationship garden rather than one person planting, watering, weeding, and harvesting while the other merely enjoys the produce. Now that we've explored all 7 non-negotiables within the standard spectrum, emotional safety and basic respect, trust and transparent communication, reciprocal emotional investment, values alignment, the right to reasonable discomfort, growth compatibility, and appropriate effort balance, let's transform this framework into practical action. Here are 3 powerful language templates to communicate your standards effectively. For standard setting, for me to feel secure, respected, valued in this relationship, I need specific non-negotiable. What would make this work for both of us? This opens conversation without ultimatum energy. For boundary reinforcement, when specific behavior happens, I feel emotion. What I need instead is specific alternative. This identifies the issue while inviting collaborative solution. For deal-breaker communication, I've realized that specific need is essential for my well-being. I'm committed to this relationship, and I also need to honor this requirement. This balances relationship investment with personal necessity. Consider this transformation. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," which triggers defensiveness, try, "When I'm sharing something important and see you checking your phone, I feel dismissed. I need your full attention during these conversations. How can we make this work for both of us?" The first approach creates walls, the second creates doorways. Use this green flag, red flag framework to evaluate your standards. Green flags. Partner responds to standards with consideration, makes genuine efforts to understand, shows improvement over time even if imperfect. Red flags. Dismisses standards as too sensitive, turns conversations back on you, temporarily improves, then reverts to patterns, makes you feel guilty for having needs. When addressing compromised needs, follow this decision tree. Identify the specific need being compromised. Clarify why this need is essential to yourself first. Communicate the need directly without accusation. Observe response, receptiveness versus resistance. Implement appropriate boundaries based on response. Timing matters. Initiate standards conversations during neutral moments, not during conflicts. Use "I've been reflecting" language rather than "you always" accusations. Maintain a calm tone that communicates self-respect rather than desperation. Finally, understand that standards communication differs across relationship stages. In dating, standards function primarily as selection criteria. Observe carefully rather than trying to fix incompatibilities. In established relationships, standards serve as growth catalysts. Express needs with patience for adjustment while maintaining clear boundaries around what's truly essential. You might worry that maintaining these standards makes you high maintenance. Here's the truth. The difference between high standards and high maintenance is whether your needs are rooted in essential well-being or arbitrary preferences. Standards protect your fundamental health. Preferences are negotiable desires. What I've consistently observed is that clear standards function as a filter that naturally attracts partners capable of meeting them while filtering out those who can't or won't. Standards don't limit your options, they refine them. When implementing standards in existing relationships, distinguish between adjustment periods and true incompatibility. The key difference is whether your partner moves toward understanding and meeting your needs, even imperfectly, or resists acknowledging them altogether. Direction matters more than perfection. Research consistently shows that relationships with clear, communicated standards demonstrate higher satisfaction and longevity than those built on excessive compromise. Healthy standards create relationship resilience, not fragility. When someone says, "But my friend compromises and she's happy," remember, the question isn't whether compromise exists in all relationships, it does, but whether essential needs are being sacrificed. There's a profound difference between flexing on preferences and compromising core requirements for emotional health. Imagine the contrast. Before implementing standards, you felt a constant background anxiety, wondering if your needs mattered, questioning your right to feel what you feel. After establishing clear standards, that energy transforms into confidence, not just in your relationship, but in every area of your life. This shift isn't just relationship enhancement, it's personal reclamation. Remember this truth: clear standards, calm communication, confident boundaries. This is the foundation of relationships that fulfill rather than deplete. This framework doesn't create division. It creates the safety needed for true intimacy. Imagine conversations where your needs are anticipated, not just acknowledged, where mutual respect is the baseline, not the goal, where standards create security rather than tension. This isn't fantasy. It's the natural result of honoring what's truly non-negotiable. 1 year from now, picture yourself in a relationship where maintaining standards has created deeper connection rather than conflict, where boundaries are respected without resentment, where both partners feel secure enough to be authentic. Begin by identifying which of these 7 standards resonates most deeply as currently compromised, and commit to one clear communication about this need. This single step can initiate profound transformation. Remember, a woman with clear relationship standards isn't reducing her chances at love. She's ensuring that the love she receives is actually worth having. Which of these 7 standards do you recognize as most critical for your relationship fulfillment? And what shifts when you refuse to compromise on it any longer?